I found my son's face on a wedding website. Not a screenshot, not a rumor. I clicked a link my sister-in-law texted her mother by accident, meant for the family group, landed in mine, and there he was, Eli, 6 years old, bald from chemo, grinning in a hospital gown, under a headline that said, "Why we're asking for contributions instead of gifts." The wedding was in 4 weeks. My son had 11 days left of induction chemo, and somehow his diagnosis had become the reason 2 people I barely knew were skipping a gift registry. I didn't call anyone that night. I took a screenshot. Then I did what I always do when the ground moves. I opened a spreadsheet. I didn't know yet that spreadsheet would end up in a courtroom. I just knew I needed somewhere to put my hands. Here's how we got there. My name's Priya. I manage inventory for a medical supply warehouse outside Sacramento, 40,000 SKUs, and I can tell you if one syringe box goes missing by Thursday. That's not a flex. It's just who counts things when the world stops making sense. Eli's diagnosis came in March. Routine blood work before a sports physical turned into a phone call I still can't fully describe, and by the following Tuesday we had a word, leukemia, and a protocol, and a hospital 2 hours from home that would own our lives for the next several months. My husband's family did what families do when a kid gets sick. They rallied, sort of. My mother-in-law, Diane, started a fundraiser within 48 hours. She didn't ask. She used a photo I'd posted of Eli in his Halloween costume, added a paragraph about our brave warrior, and had it live before I'd even told my own boss I needed leave. I want to be fair here. I was grateful. Bone marrow transplants aren't cheap even with insurance, and Pride has never once paid a hospital bill. What I noticed, and couldn't unnotice, was who controlled the money. Not me. Not my husband technically either, the account routed through Diane's daughter Kayla, the one currently planning a wedding. Small thing, I told myself. Family thing. It'll sort itself out. It did not sort itself out. By May, the total had crossed $60,000, and Eli was admitted for his transplant. 3 weeks isolated in a sterile room, no visitors under 18, no siblings, nothing but me, a cot, and a window I watched sunrises through like they were the only proof time still moved. My husband worked days to keep our insurance intact. I didn't leave that room once in 9 days. On day 6, a nurse named Odette brought me coffee I hadn't ordered, and told me the family down the hall had been asking about my stress levels to the front desk instead of Eli's counts. I laughed, because the alternative was screaming. On day 9, my phone buzzed with a photo. Not from me, sent to me. Diane, at a bridal shower, holding a sign that read, Team Eli, raising a mimosa. The caption underneath, visible in the screenshot before she deleted it an hour later, fighting for our warrior in style. I didn't respond. I put the phone face down and held my son's hand while a machine dripped someone else's stem cells into his arm. Here's where it gets worse, because that photo wasn't even the twist. The twist was the invoice. 3 days after the transplant, still in isolation, I got a billing update from the hospital. Routine, expected, a running total of what insurance wouldn't cover. I forwarded it to the fundraiser account holder, Kayla, the way I'd been doing for weeks, asking for a transfer to cover the deposit. She replied fast, for once. So sorry, can't right now. Everything's earmarked for the venue deposits. We'll sort you out after the wedding. Promise. Venue deposits. I read that sentence in a hospital room with my bald 6-year-old asleep beside a pole of IV bags, and something in my chest went very quiet and very cold. I want you to sit with that number difference for a second, because I did. The fundraiser, by then, had raised $71,000. My family had received $4,000 of it, sent in 2 installments, both photographed for the fundraiser page with captions about supporting our warrior's journey. The rest, apparently, was a wedding fund with a sick kid's face on the landing page. I didn't scream. I didn't confront anyone from a hospital bed. I did the only thing that's ever worked for me. I started documenting. Screenshots, dates, dollar amounts, the invoice email, Diane's mimosa photo before it vanished. I named the folder something plain, Eli, receipts. It would matter more than I knew. We came home in June to a stack of hospital bills our insurance's deductible hadn't touched, totaling just over $14,000. I sent a polite, documented request to Kayla: transfer control of the fundraiser to me, Eli's mother, or send the outstanding balance straight to the hospital's billing office. I attached the platform's own instructions. It takes one click. What I got back, 5 days later, was a group text. Not a private reply, a family group text, 14 people deep, the whole extended tree. Diane's message read, "I think it's best if we discuss this as a family, instead of Priya making demands. Some of us have put a lot of emotional labor into this fundraiser too." Emotional labor. For a spreadsheet she wouldn't let me see. Nobody in that chat, not one of the 14, asked how Eli's counts were doing. Not one asked if he was in pain, or scared, or sleeping. I sat there rereading it in the pediatric follow-up waiting room, watching my son color a dinosaur with a hand that still had a bruise from the IV, and I understood something I hadn't let myself say out loud yet. This was never about Eli. It never had been. I want to tell you what happened at the wedding, because I wasn't there. Nobody invited me. But Eli's aunt sent a video days later, thinking I'd want to see it. A slideshow, projected behind the head table, of my son, bald, hospital gown, smiling bravely for a room of strangers in cocktail dresses, while the DJ narrated something about how illness reminds us what love really means, right before the first dance. They used my son's chemo photos as wedding entertainment. I didn't cry watching it. I'd used up my crying in a hospital stairwell months earlier. What I did instead was open my laptop and search California's charity registration database, because if there was a foundation behind this fundraiser, it would have a paper trail, and it did. The Eli Strong Foundation. Registered in April. President, Diane. Treasurer, Kayla. Mission statement: supporting pediatric cancer families in crisis, which is a lovely sentence about a category containing exactly one family who'd never signed off on any of it. There was a donate button. There was a stock photo, not even of Eli, a different bald child, because apparently accuracy wasn't a priority. And there was an announcement for something called the Eli Strong Gala, scheduled for September, venue generously donated. The same venue as Kayla's wedding. Same florist. Same photographer, different hashtag. I confronted Diane at what was supposed to be a normal Sunday dinner. I asked, calmly, where the $67,000 that hadn't come to us had gone. She didn't flinch. She refilled my water glass first, a stalling technique I now recognize for exactly what it was, and told me the money was protected, that impulsive spending by someone under stress wasn't something the family could risk, and that I should be grateful the foundation existed at all, because, and I quote, "people don't give to one kid forever. They give to something that lasts. Something that lasts." My son's leukemia, filed under long-term branding strategy. I left that dinner and didn't come back for a long time. Here's the part I did next that I'm not proud to admit took me this long. I called a lawyer. Not to sue, to understand what leverage I actually had. The answer was almost nothing, legally, as Eli's biological mother, because the fundraiser wasn't in my name and I'd never been made an officer of the foundation. What I did have was documentation, months of it. And documentation, it turns out, is its own kind of weapon. It just needs somewhere to detonate. That somewhere arrived in August, in the form of Kayla's new husband. Marcus and I had never been close. Quiet guy, kept to himself at family things. He found me at Eli's follow-up scan, of all places, sitting in the same waiting room by coincidence, and he looked like a man who hadn't slept. He said he did the books for Kayla's photography business, and that some of the foundation's transactions had run through their joint account by accident during wedding planning, and he'd seen numbers that didn't sit right with him. He handed me a flash drive in a waiting room chair, between an X-ray and a blood draw, and said, "I have kids too. If someone did this to one of mine, I'd want to know." What was on it broke something loose in my chest that had been holding for 5 months. A $22,000 transfer, labeled venue, dated 3 weeks before the wedding. Foundation funds, paying for Kayla's wedding venue, laundered through a line item that said, Eli Strong Gala Deposit, refundable. It was never refunded. There was no gala deposit. There was a wedding. There was also, and this is the part that actually made me sit down on the waiting room floor, a $9,000 payment to a cosmetic dental office, Diane's name on the invoice, veneers, for the photos apparently, because a foundation president needed to look the part for donors. My son's chemo money paid for his grandmother's teeth. I filed a complaint with the State Attorney General's charitable division that week. 40 pages, every screenshot, every invoice, Marcus's flash drive included with his written consent. I filed it not for revenge, I want to be honest about that, but because Eli's cardiologist, his oncologist, had just told us he'd need a second round of maintenance therapy that our insurance wouldn't fully cover, and every dollar that had ever belonged to him was sitting in someone else's wedding album instead of his treatment fund. The fundraiser froze within 10 days, grey banner, under review. In a town small enough that everyone's cousin knows everyone's hairdresser, that banner might as well have been skywritten. Diane called 11 times in one afternoon. I let everyone go to voicemail and listened to them in order, like weather rolling through, wounded matriarch, then negotiator. We can figure out a number, Priya. Then by the 9th call, something close to a threat about lawyers who, it turned out, had already been paid by money that wasn't hers to spend. The last voicemail was different. Quiet, no performance in it. I don't know how to undo this, she said, and hung up before I could decide whether that was an apology or just the sound of a woman realizing an audience had left the room. A local investigative reporter picked up the Attorney General filing 2 weeks later. Public record, easy story, the kind that writes its own headline. Foundation for Cancer Toddler Funded Family Wedding. I gave one interview, on my terms, no footage of Eli, no hospital images, nothing that would let a stranger find my son in a search bar. The reporter didn't love that restriction. I didn't care. He'd already been used as a prop once. Not again. Not for better lighting. The foundation dissolved before the state could force it. Diane's name went on a registry that says she can't run a charity in this state again. Kayla and Marcus divorced within the year. Not entirely because of this, but I don't think it helped, and I don't think it should have. The frozen donations were refunded to the original donors, every dollar walking back out the door it came in. Strangers who'd given in good faith started calling the hospital's own family assistance fund instead, asking if there was a way to give that would actually reach him this time. There was. There'd always been. It just never ran through anyone's kitchen table. Eli finished maintenance therapy in the spring. He rang the bell they keep in the oncology hallway for exactly this occasion, and the sound of it is still, 4 months later, the best sound I've heard in my life. We don't do big family dinners anymore. We do small ones. Me, my husband, Eli, Odette when her shift allows it, Marcus and his kids most Sundays, because it turns out showing up once, honestly, outweighs a decade of showing up for cameras. Last week Eli asked me why Grandma Diane doesn't come around. I told him some people love the idea of you more than they love you, and that's not something a 6-year-old needs to carry, but it's something a mother needs to say out loud at least once. He thought about it, the way he thinks about everything now. Slower, more careful, like someone who's already survived the hardest math of his life. Then he asked if we could have pancakes. We had pancakes. That's the whole story. One accidental text, one flash drive in a waiting room, and a fundraiser that finally reached the kid whose face was on it the whole time. If you've ever watched someone perform love for an audience while the person who actually needed it sat alone, comment the word witness. I read every one. And if you've got someone in your life still waiting for a Sunday dinner that never comes, maybe be the one who shows up instead.